Hello and welcome back to Ensuring Success 2024. This is session 7, end of the first day. And we are so grateful that you're here with us. Hope you've been here all 7 hours. If not, I'm sorry, but you won't be able to call yourselves 14-hour warriors tomorrow afternoon at this time. But anyway, we've been doing this all day. We'll be back all day tomorrow, so we hope you'll be continuing to stay with us. We cannot make Ensuring Success a thing. It's not possible without the help of our amazing sponsors, and they include ADP, Avalara, BotKeeper, Canopy, CPA.com, eFile4Biz, WriteWorks, SafeSend, Suralink, Wolters Kluwer, Xero, and Zoho. So we thank all of them immensely for making this event possible. I'd like to explain briefly how CPE works for this session. If you're just joining us, if you've been here all day, I'm sorry, it's the 7th time you've heard it, but it's the way it goes. During each session, we provide 3 CPE codes. And so during this session, we'll break 3 times with a CPE code, which will appear on the bottom of your screen. To make sure you're paying attention, you'll hear this sound. And that's your cue to write down that code if you plan on claiming CPE credit for this session. After the event, you can click the CPE option on the menu at the top of our screen, and that will allow you to enter the codes for each of the sessions you've attended, and you can download your certificates there. If you have any questions for our speakers in this session, there's a box right under our video screen here called Ask a Question, and you can enter questions there, and we'll be getting them here on stage live. If you have questions about CPE or questions about tech issues or anything else that is not for the speakers, you can contact us directly at info@EnsuringSuccess.com. People are standing by to answer those questions. We are on social media with the hashtag DecemberCPE, so we'd love if you'd check out various social media venues, look for December CPE, and we'd love to have you share some information about us using our hash code. Take a picture of our panel and post it, or take a picture of yourself watching our panel and post that with hashtag DecemberCPE, so everyone will know how lucky you are to be here. All right, this is the last session of the day, and it's a great one. It's called Generative AI and Your Accounting Firm. And we think you've probably at least heard of Generative AI. We're going to introduce you to some of the basics, and then we're going to get into how this really can apply to your accounting firm in ways that you may not have imagined. Before we do that, I'm going to introduce our panel real quickly and give them each an opportunity to tell you a little bit about themselves. I'm joined by TJ Lewis, John Higgins, Blake Oliver, and my co-moderator, Alexandra DeFelice. TJ, tell us about yourself.
Absolutely. Thanks, Gail. Hi, everyone. My name is TJ Lewis. I am an innovation strategist with the WriteWorks Labs team and have been part of building a product called Spark, which is a generative AI tool that's in the market. And I've been a part of that for the last couple of years now. So most of the time I spend talking with our users and things like that. So that's the perspective I hope to bring to the table today.
John?
Hi, I'm John Higgins with Higgins Advisory, and this is my 3rd CPA technology advisory startup. And I'm doing what I love to do the most is to, over my whole career, I've really spent learning about emerging technologies and helping to educate the profession on how to apply those technologies. And of course, right now, everything's all about AI, so really excited to be a part of this panel.
Hey everybody, I'm Blake Oliver. I am the co-founder and CEO of Earmark, an app that gets you CPE for listening to podcasts. I also co-host the Accounting Podcast, which is the #1 podcast for accountants in the world. And I spend a lot of time thinking about technology and accounting. I had my own small firm in the past, and we were an early adopter of cloud computing. And I view AI as really being that next trend that hopefully we're all going to take advantage of.
And I'm Alexandra DeFelice, Director of Marketing and Business Development for Payne & Fears Law Firm in Southern California. I am not a CPA. I hang out with them on TV all day today and all day tomorrow. And I am your co-moderator and designated bell ringer.
All right, and I am Gail Perry, Editor-in-Chief of CPA Practice Advisor. We are so delighted to have you here today. Let's start with a little basic information. What do we mean by generative AI? TJ, I'll pick on you because you're right next to me.
Excellent. So generative AI is sort of the newest iteration, right, of sort of what we've come to know as artificial intelligence. Obviously, artificial intelligence as a concept has been around for a number of years, since the 40s and 50s. We've been sort of in this pursuit of mimicking the human brain. And generative AI is just the latest version of that. So it's sort of the newest version really starts kind of with the invention of the GPT and large language models, and so that's really been the work, and that's been popularized as officially as of November 2022 when ChatGPT entered the scene. So that's really what we're talking about. It's AI that's using natural language and generating answers based on the prompts.
Okay, and so why should accountants care about what this is? John?
Well, I think it's a game changer. You know, I've been in this profession a long time and seen some really significant technology revolutions, starting with the spreadsheet, believe it or not, and then the cloud computing was another big revolution. This is, I believe, going to be the biggest revolution we're going to experience. And it seems to be happening at a pace faster than any of the other technologies before it. Right now, it's a little bit hard to figure out what's hype and what's real, but when you start to use the tools, you start to realize just how real it is. And it's going to be very interesting to see how this evolves in the next few years, not lifetime, next few years.
Yeah, John, like you said something which is about using it. I think the key is to just try it, and you'll experience it, and maybe that will help the light bulb go off. For me, cloud. I got into cloud early, right? And my firm benefited as a result. And I really feel like this is exactly the same thing happening 20 years later, right? Like you said, we had spreadsheets,
Yep.
Then we had cloud, and now we have AI. And the thing for me that's really exciting is that now we can basically code processes. We can create workflows, like you said, with natural language in English. Mm-hmm. Not having to know how to code. Mm-hmm. And so now I, as an accountant, can all of a sudden do all this stuff that I couldn't do before when I had to hire programmers or something.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, it's really opened that power up to those non-technical folks in your firm, and,
yes.
and you know. Right.
And I just want to mention, we talk about ChatGPT kind of generically, and it's just one of many generative AI programs. And can we just like run through a bunch of names just so people things that people might have heard of and don't realize that it's all part of the same thing, except some of the programs sort of specialize in different things?
Yeah, there's so many, right? I mean, the popular ones. Go ahead, Blake.
ChatGPT, Claude, Spark, obviously.
Sure. Yeah, I think so. So what you're kind of identifying there is there's sort of the general purpose, sort of broad-based. You mentioned ChatGPT, Claude. You've got Perplexity, which is sort of a hybrid model plus search. Mm-hmm. You've got Gemini from Google, and then you get into sort of more industry niche-specific things. So for the accounting profession, you've got certainly Spark. You've got others like TaxGPT and those kinds of tools that are sort of playing a more niche role.
And I think that's going to be one of the challenges, Gail, is for the practitioners out there is like, okay, where do I go? Which one do I use? ChatGPT is kind of the poster child because it was first to market. And now you've got all these others. And as I was talking to Randy Johnson before this session, they're leapfrogging each other. One day Gemini's better than Anthropic. The next day, Anthropic's better than ChatGPT. And so how do you figure out which one to use? And I think personally that you just pick one and get started. Like Blake was saying, just use it.
Or if you're me, you subscribe to all of them.
Oh, yeah, right.
It's still worth it though, right? The productivity boost
Yes.
from these chatbots, if you use it on the right things, is just incredible. Like I was on the plane coming here and I had to write a 10-minute video script. And I was able to do that in under an hour using in a conversation with Claude. This is something that would have taken me 4 to 8 hours in the past, right? And you might say, okay, well, what does that have to do with work as an accountant? But what is writing a script, right? It's taking information, organizing it, and communicating it. And how often do we do that in accounting? It's like all the time, right? I feel like it.
Absolutely.
So
We're going to talk more about how this is important to accountants, but first, we want to take just a moment to display on the bottom of the screen the first CPE code for this session. So, not the slide, the code.
I'm going to do we need to redisplay it just
There it
in
is.
case, because
It's
if
there.
the slide was there. Okay,
There we
I'm
go.
just going to bing it again just in case.
Okay. Make sure you write this down if you plan to request CPE credit for this session.
You know, Gail, I again snuck in a little polling survey just to feel out the audience, and 21% said that they are actually already using AI in their firm. 24% said no way, and 53.6% said they're considering it. So this was a great transition, Blake, to say, what does this have to do with in an accounting firm? Where can they start? Where can they start dabbling with things that they can actually use in the firm? And then we could go from that evolution.
And you're not allowed to say, you can use ChatGPT to write your email messages.
That's done. Okay. Darn. So the thing that really is exciting to me right now is financial statement analysis. So you can take an income statement and balance sheet, statement of cash flows, traditional financial statements, upload them to ChatGPT or Claude, or I imagine Spark can do this, Perplexity can do this, and ask it to do a variance analysis and to create a narrative based on that variance analysis. And that's a great starting point for a monthly client meeting about their financials.
So I assume with something like this, you're not going to want to use the free ChatGPT. Like, you don't want to put any client information in that, right?
Definitely not. If you are not paying for it, that means you are the product, right? And whatever you upload is the product, right, John?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, are you specialize in security, right? Are you?
No, more on the AI,
So-
just kind of strategically how to use it, embrace it in a firm.
Which of the which of the paid plans do you think that firms should subscribe to, or what do they need to look at, I guess?
Well, I think, like I was saying earlier, I mean, they're all kind of leapfrogging each other. The path I've taken is I've kind of focused on just one or two at this point, because I really like to focus on how do the practitioners use it, because they don't really have a lot of time to be experimenting with a lot of them. You know, like you said, you belong to member of all of them,
Yeah.
use all of them. And so, of course, I use ChatGPT. That's the poster child. And then, I do a lot of work with Microsoft 365. So Copilot being kind of, I see it as an extension of ChatGPT because they have 49% ownership of OpenAI. So those are two that I've, primarily focused on myself.
Okay, so going back to accounting functions. So that financial analysis. What else, John?
Well, so maybe we could put the slide up now. Could we put that slide? Is
Yeah.
it a good time?
Yes.
Because I do a lot of presentations on this for CPAs, and I've kind of evolved to like 4 buckets of applications that I put it into, and we
Okay.
can certainly all talk about this. But first one is research and the green ones on the slide there are like I put low risk, and so we have how many people? What percentage said they don't? No way.
23.
Okay, so for the 23%, focus on the green. There's a lot of value you can get out of these tools today without putting a single piece of information at risk.
So the green, for those who have bad eyesight like I'm starting to get, are research and learning is one bucket, communication and content generation, which is another bucket called emailing your clients, but we won't say that to Gail. The third is workflow automation and personal productivity.
Yeah, so let's start with the research and learning. And just what is the most popular application for CPAs today that they use all day, every day almost?
Google.
Well, I was going to say Excel. Okay.
I'm the one who uses Google.
Different generations, maybe.
Yeah,
on
so
this.
so we didn't rehearse this, obviously. But, a lot of CPAs spend a lot of time in Excel. And so when we talk about research and learning, if you have really anywhere in the firm, but let's say a new staff accountant, I've spent a lot of time providing training on Excel over the years. You don't really need to go to Excel training anymore. You just have the second monitor open with ChatGPT. You have Excel on the other monitor. Say, okay, the boss just told me to make an amortization schedule. Well, what's an amortization schedule? I ask it. Okay, tell me how to make it in Excel. And it'll give you step-by-step instructions on how to make it in Excel.
So why can't you get that from Google?
Well, you can watch a YouTube video that you found on Google, but this is like jumping straight into the answers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't have to sift through all the sponsored results first,
Right.
those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And now you can even take it to the next step. Instead of giving you instructions on how to make the amortization schedule, it'll just make the spreadsheet with
Right.
the amortization schedule. It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about how fast this is moving.
Yeah.
So, John, one of the things on that slide that I think is interesting, and I love that you put those in low risk, certainly not no risk, right?
Right.
And I think one of the important things when I saw that was even there, without proper education and training of your staff, you can still get into some situations where people are inputting, improper data, et cetera. So you kind of have to look at the various data types that you have access to. What is it that you're trying to solve for in that research and learning or within the communication piece, right? So you can still put in some some sensitive or personally identifying information within the data. And so I think it still comes down to, so yes, I would absolutely start with those, but you still need to identify what are we using this for? At the end of the day, what data are we putting into this in order to get the response that we need? And you still need to your staff still need to understand what they can and can't or shouldn't put in there.
Yeah, I think education is critical right now, that the profession overall just needs to be educated on the fundamentals of how this technology works.
And how do they even get that? Because it's evolving every day.
I think one of the biggest reasons firms aren't using AI right now is the data security concern, right? It's well, if I allow my team to do this, then they are going to put client information into it inevitably, and then my firm is at risk. And I feel like that is, if you just swap AI with cloud, we are back 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So somehow we all overcame that hesitancy, right? Somehow we put clauses into our engagement letters that protected us. We bought insurance that protected us. We taught our team to use basic security precautions to protect us, and we all got over it. So I don't know. It's funny on your chart. I think that my example was the highest risk one. I just went straight to the highest risk one.
Yeah, but you talk about the cloud. It kind of took us 25 years as a profession to get to the cloud, right?
Yeah.
We don't have that kind of time with AI. It's just moving so fast that if you don't get involved, you're going to get behind in a big way, just from pure productivity. Your example of writing the script on the plane. I mean, that's big time saving.
Yeah. I saw a stat that your average employee with AI saves, they're about 14% more productive today. And that is only after about a couple of years of having.
Meaning what, Blake? Where are they seeing the productivity gains?
I think it's with generating written communication, not necessarily just emails, but also project planning, creating a whole project brief for something you want to do in your firm used to be a huge process. It would take a lot of time. And now you can simply have a conversation. You can even talk using the advanced voice mode with ChatGPT, and it can ask you in a Q&A format questions and then generate your document. That's one. And then the other one I think maybe TJ mentioned or John mentioned, which is research.
Yep.
Perplexity, tax research on accounting standards. That is so much faster with Perplexity than with Google, I would say many times.
You have to be careful with that, though, right? Because some of the laws are changing on a regular basis, and so they might give you an old version of something.
So that has already been solved. That was the biggest concern with ChatGPT.
Right, because it was based on old data.
It was trained as of older data and not updated and not connected to the internet. And now both ChatGPT and Perplexity are connected to the internet and will cite their sources. So you can actually check the source. Yeah. So you have to be careful and you have to say, I'm going to check the source and then go click through and make sure it's a legitimate source. Right. But if you do that, you're basically doing a Google search, but 10 times faster. And
I think it's that situation, I'll not put so much emphasis on the writing and email part, but I do think when as a starting point, the next question that comes in from a client, take that question and start there, in your tool of choice, and then just follow the process all the way through. Do the research, ask the question, ask for refinement. Go ahead and have it. If you think about can you do a lot of that yourself? Probably, but it still takes time for you to go, okay, now I need to think about how am I going to respond to my client? How am I going to type all this out? Then I have to go find the correct deduction limit for this year, et cetera, and put it all in there. And that's where you're going to see those time savings, because you can do that all in one thread, from research to communication, and then copy paste, send it out into the email. And so I think that is sort of a basic use case that I think I see it so many times. That's the aha moment, that would have taken me 20, 30 minutes just to formulate the response and make sure it's appropriate for the client, et cetera, where you can do it in 3 minutes,
I've trained an AI project, an agent, on how I write. I've given it examples of my writing. You can do this with Claude projects, and ChatGPT now has this. Give it 10 samples of your writing. You can give it more. And then the next time you want to write something, you just give it talking points, and it will draft an email, and it will sound like you. And
it takes on your personality after a while. It's kind of interesting, really.
So the hard part is creating that data, the training data for it.
Right.
But get your team. Here's an example. Go have your team. If you got a team in your firm, forward to me all of the most common client questions you get, the ones that you're answering over and over again, and upload those. And then it will generate the answer based on previous responses.
I think that's the hardest thing, is that you're looking at this blank canvas, and this came up in another session before. It's just completely white, and there's no like, hey, if there's no like, remember the little paper clip that would say, it looks like you're trying to do this. There's nothing like that, I don't think, that will give you hints on what things you can use it for. So I think sessions like this are invaluable for accountants that are trying to be like, they have the staffing issues, they don't have enough people to do the work, and what other things, and we've used this term, what other things can you give the robots that aren't so much the human touch?
Oh, here's a good one. Responding to notices. You can give an IRS notice to one of these agents, and you can ask it to generate a response.
I actually did that in real life. I had a personal situation where I had an IRS notice, and I said, here's what I want to accomplish, write the letter, and it wrote a beautiful letter. Yeah.
Works great also for insurance companies.
Yeah.
If you can't get a claim processed, it'll do the work. So
Cool.
And I found that, one example I use a lot is just like, let's say you have a client that's going to open up a chain of car washes and says, hey, John, can you give me some cash control policies? I don't want my employees ripping me off because it's a very cash-intensive business. Just go to ChatGPT and say, hey, I've got a car wash entrepreneur here, 8 car washes in Seattle. Give me a cash control policy guidelines. Within 2 minutes, it gives you a beautiful document. And it augments us, it doesn't replace us, right? So I have my responsibility, I gotta read that and say, is this accurate? Is there too much in there? But gosh, it saves you that, startup time of writing the document.
Or let's say you already have the document, you can use AI to figure out what you're missing. You upload the document and say, what did I not consider? What should I consider adding? That to me is one of the most valuable things, because there's all those things we don't think about. We have a limited knowledge, but these LLMs are trained on like the whole internet. Yeah. So.
Okay, we're going to stop for just 1 second and display on the bottom of your screen the second CPE code for this session.
Blake, you get to do the third one. I used to allow this last year, and none of the panelists got to do it yet, but you got so excited that you'll get to do number 3.
I might have to, or I'm going to press it anyway.
I'm going to allow it. Okay. So, right. Gail, we actually, we did survey the audience about their biggest concerns. Would it be okay to...
Let's do that, because I wanted to go into concerns right after this.
And so I have the results here, and then maybe we could go over each one of these. By far and away, the biggest concern was data privacy and security. That was almost 50%. That was followed by reliability, and then integration challenges, which we talked about in the previous session. So that will be interesting to talk about. Operational risks, and then regulatory compliance, and then other, which could be anything. No one filled in the blank on what that other means. So, what do you want to start with, Gail?
I was thinking, when we were preparing for this, we had a conversation about concerns and sort of risks relating to AI, and there was a horror story about TurboTax that somebody wanted to share.
Oh yes. Well, so TurboTax last season got in trouble because they built an AI chatbot into TurboTax that was giving false information. It was hallucinating, and so that was a great example of the problems that AI has when it's not trained on specific data sets, like a general AI tool.
In other words, you just need to be careful, and you need to verify.
Well, and you have to limit the scope of what the AI is using for its research, right? Like TJ, with Spark, you can actually limit what the AI considers.
Right. Yeah, so we do that through augmenting the system instructions to basically kind of help point it at, various, so you get the, excuse me, you get the large language model that looks at everything.
Right.
And super simple example, right? When ChatGPT first came out, I said, give me some practice management software recommendations. They gave me 10 that were all in the legal space. So even by just saying, and this is, a combination of prompt engineering and kind of what you're talking about, but even just saying, the context is, I'm in the accounting profession. Give me some practice management recommendations. Then it's able to narrow that down, and it's looking at only a section now, or a smaller subset of the large language model to provide that. And so yes, exactly to your point.
And that's like what we were talking about the last session. You could have the right tool for the wrong person. right? So you don't want to have that.
Yeah, I think on that chart we had in red was the data analysis, and I always like to say
That was high risk, was the
yeah,
red.
that's high risk because you're doing data analysis. Whenever you're generating output that includes facts or figures, then you really have to validate that information relative to how much you're going to rely on it. And one of my biggest concerns about this technology is that we get lazy and we just take it as the truth. And in fact, even though it may be coming from what we would think would be a very authoritative source, you know, if you're going to rely on it today, because this is like version 1.0 of this technology, you really need to do that part of verifying the accuracy of information that's generated.
You know, and you can even roll that back to when Google first came out. I used to work for a newspaper, and we had a statue that was erected across the street, literally. And my reporter's writing, like, what is this statue? What does it say? And I'm like, walk across the freaking street and see what it says. Anybody could put anything on Google or Wikipedia or whatever. Right. Like, you still have to check it, you know? So that's probably the most important takeaway, right? So
yeah, there was a study done, I think it came out about a year ago or so, but a combination of folks from Wharton and Harvard. And one of the things they did is they were using, so it was Boston Consulting Group was the test subjects here, I guess, if you will, and they gave a certain number of folks access to ChatGPT at the time, and a certain number of folks had to do all the tasks manually. And so they found in a number of areas, those that had access to the Gen AI tools did better. But then they specifically gave them a test or a task at the end of their study that they knew Gen AI was not going to do very well at, given the current state of the tools. And what they found was those that had access to Gen AI actually did worse because they relied too heavily on it. And that was just a very short period of time, right? They gained the trust and they were relying on the tool. The folks that didn't have access actually did better because they were checking things, you know, more thoroughly. So it is definitely a concern and something that you just have to be aware of.
Right.
So shifting over to the security, because that was the biggest one, and there's tons of questions coming in about how do you maintain client privacy? How do I make sure my stuff is safe? How do you guys want to address that? Who wants to take that?
Well, there's a couple of things. First, I would say there's so much value you can get by just generating output from the system without putting any of your data at risk. Start with that. For the, you know, we have the large percentage that just says no way. Then don't put any data in there. You can still get value from it. Then, you know, when you get your actual data where you do want to upload it as part of your prompt, you've got to anonymize it as best you can, but that's easier said than done. You know, to like take a tax document and strip out all the identifiable information. Sounds good, but it is a lot of work. And you also, whatever tool you're using, you really want to come to understand what is their policy relative to taking your data and what do they do with it. That also is easier said than done because you have to read those agreements, and it's not easy to read those agreements. Now, I know like with OpenAI, with ChatGPT, you can opt out of having your data go back and train the LLM. Is that good enough? You know, I think it's like any kind of security, you have to have multiple layers of protection to do the best you can.
If you're on Microsoft products, you've got Copilot. That's governed by the same data protection clauses that, you know, are around all the data in Microsoft. So is there really any reason not to be using client data with Copilot?
I don't think so personally. That's my opinion. I have a lot of faith in Microsoft. I mean, they have a cyber defense center they spend $1 billion a year on, right? And their full commitment is to make sure that your chat data never goes outside the 4 virtual walls of your organization. So yeah, I would agree with you on that.
So then if we go beyond to ChatGPT, which, you know, Microsoft has invested billions of dollars in, if you subscribe to one of the ChatGPT team plans or enterprise plans, I understand, I haven't actually read the terms, but I understand that there are, you know, commercial data protection terms in there, similar to what you get from Microsoft. So then the question is, well, is it safe to upload client financials into ChatGPT teams?
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's going to be like you're developing a model, and it's going to come down to trust. We have to have trust. Like I always joke, well, why do we all trust that Excel sum formula always calculates the total properly? It's just trust based upon the user community and the history. It's going to be the same thing. If Right Networks comes out with a system, I'm going to have more trust in it because I know the people that, you know, are part of the organization. And
right. I think that's really the key, right? The first job, and we've kind of said, you know, no matter which product you choose, make sure that they're not training on your data, regardless. That just helps you you know, ensure that's good. And Blake, I think you mentioned, right? So the free version, obviously, of ChatGPT, and the plus version is like the $20 per month version. You can opt out, but that's a process that, you know, if you're going to use that, you have to make sure your staff know, hey, before you engage, just go through the process and opt out. Once you get into the team, enterprise, et cetera, then they don't.
That's better because I, as the administrator, can opt out for my whole team from training the model. So, like for me, I'm comfortable at Earmark with having ChatGPT teams and giving that to everybody and saying, go ahead, use our data with it.
Right.
We have opted out of training.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll be honest, like, not to go too deep into Spark, but one of the reasons that we even started building in the first place was because we knew that training on a model was not tenable for this profession. And that was really, early on in ChatGPT, that's all you had. It was free, and that was all you could do. So through the API and the way that we interact, you're not, it's not being trained. They're not training on your data. And so that's one of the key things that we jumped into for that reason. Yeah. And then beyond that, I think you guys were talking a little bit about, so beyond that, then it's a matter of, do you trust, that data that you're using exists in a number of other places that you already have said you trust, right? So what are the criteria that you're vetting those companies by? And that's the same criteria you should be vetting the other companies by in the AI space.
Yeah. At the last session, one of the things or a few sessions back, I'm losing track at this point, and we're only on session 7, is security before convenience, right? So one of the things that I've been hesitant to use is like Zoom has this AI app that you can put on it that will take notes for you. And I'm like, if it's my legal marketing association and we're just talking about best practices and blah, 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 okay, fine. But if I'm talking about client stuff, I don't want to turn that on because I don't know where that's going.
So what kind of training should we be putting in place in these firms?
I think first you got to start with the basics. I think that spending a little bit of time to understand just fundamentally how large language models work, so that you can understand the risks of it without getting too technical on it. But people have to understand you have this concept called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, which is when you bring your own content into it. People just need to know what that is and what the risks are, as we've been talking about it. What are the risks of bringing your data in? And then along the lines of that, with that education, they need to have a policy, a usage policy. And you can't really create a usage policy if you don't know what you're doing and what the risks are. So that's where I would start.
So I do a session on this pretty regularly, and I'll try and do the briefest version. But the thing I recommend is starting with a person, right? No matter the size of your firm, starting with a person, call it your AI champion. And that person, we talked earlier, like you were mentioning, like you have access to all the tools. I would recommend that the AI champion be paying for, the 3 to 5 most common things that you're going to, because the tools are different, the way they implement different things is different, the needs are different within your firm across different areas. So the AI champion should be the person that's sort of paying attention, and they're the ones that are going to be able to communicate some of these things across your team as things change, as terms and conditions change, or as, whatever. And so I would recommend somebody that sort of takes on that role. Depending on the size of your firm, I would say it's probably helpful to have an AI council, or you don't want to committee things to death, but to represent the various functional areas, because bookkeepers, tax managers, auditors, then you get to marketing and sales and all these other people. They're going to have different needs, and you may need to find different tools for those. And so again, I would support that AI champion with some specific folks that are covering the different functional areas. And then, as you mentioned, I would take all those people and create a policy, So I think having a policy and then speaking about it, carving off time in your team meetings, staff meetings, et cetera, to cover those important things on a regular basis is super important.
While we're talking about risk, can we also consider the risk of not using AI and not jumping on this trend? Because if you got into cloud early, and you built a outsourced accounting practice, you saw 20% annual growth for years and years and years. How many practices doubled and doubled because of that? And so if you don't do this, you're risking not having the productivity gains, not having that's revenue. That's money you're losing.
And the common line is, will AI replace CPAs? And the answer is no, AI won't replace CPAs, but CPAs who use AI will replace CPAs who don't. I do believe that to be the case. And the other risk we have of not embracing it is we're going to have competition outside of the profession, because now people will be more empowered to do things more like what a CPA is qualified to do without having to become CPA. So I see that's a big risk as well.
So last week at, I don't know if can I mention Digital CPA
Yes, you
conference
can.
last week?
No.
So last week at Digital CPA, Ali K. Miller, who's a big influencer in the AI space, she's spent plenty of time with Google, et cetera, and Amazon, and she was giving the keynote. They went to the Q&A, and the first question out of the gate was about data security and privacy, and she just kind of, I'm summarizing and here, but her response was very much, oh, risk, okay. It's interesting that that's the first question out of the gate, and her comment was basically, if risk is your first concern, to your point, Blake, you're going to be left behind because you're gonna wait until we've got all the regulations and all the compliance and all of that in place, and you're going to miss the boat.
Ron Baker likes to say there is no profit without risk.
Yeah.
So the more risk you take, the more profit you can make.
Yeah.
So it's just about balancing that risk, I guess, is
Right.
the key.
Let's take one more quick break. Are you ready?
Are you ready, Blake?
Okay.
Can I do it?
Just a moment. We're going to display on the bottom of the screen the third CPE code for this session.
Now.
There is some training.
So be sure to write that down if you're planning on claiming CPE credit for this session.
Hey, Gail, I have a question that came in that I
Yeah,
wanted
let's
to-
go for it.
I love billing questions. And they ask, how do you adjust your billings for AI time savings, which...
Oh, I love this question.
That's my favorite.
Go ahead, TJ.
I don't have any answer. No, I love the question because I think it's so important to think about, right? There's really large implications here in how do you bill, and I do think when you, I've been in the accounting, space for a number of years here, but I've never been an accountant, so take this comment for what it's worth. But I do think there's huge implications, and if you're still billing by time, I think this is another reason why that's just not going to be tenable long term. So.
Yep. Anecdotally, I was speaking at a major university, had an accounting and auditing summit, and so I sat in on the first speaker's presentation. He was a partner with the Big Four, and first thing I'll say is, it just blew me away the extent to which they are using generative AI in the audit function. And so he's talking about this, and I'm thinking, wow, a lot of it's proprietary at that level. Those firms have, the funds to invest in. So at the end of his talk, he was taking questions. I said, so, because you could tell they're getting really substantial productivity gains. I said, so what are you doing about the economics of this? And he says, we talk about it at the firm every day. And that's a Big Four firm because they're seeing that. They're not really sure yet how to deal with this because they are getting greater productivity. And you can only raise your hourly rate so much, but I don't know what that limit is, to be honest with you. But changing all the things we've been talked about, Ron Baker's with his value pricing and all that, now's the time for sure with this technology.
This will be the end of the billable hour. Ron Baker will live to see it happen. I am committed to that.
Gail, how many years have we been saying that on this session?
We have. I think the very first year we did this, Ron was here, and we've been carrying his message forward ever since.
It's a good message.
The reason I know it's going to happen is because I had to make the switch. When I built a cloud practice, I automated 80% of my work as a bookkeeper. And I could not bill hourly.
Right.
If I did, I would be shooting myself in the foot. So I switched to fixed fees. And I think the same productivity gains are coming. We're going to have 80% productivity gains in audit and tax because of this technology. It's going to happen over a period of like 5, 10, 15 years, but it will come. And yeah, you can't bill hourly under those conditions anymore.
Right.
It just doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? And what's amazing is that we can actually make more money and we can work less. I want to see the accounting profession working 6 hours a day and having extra time to spend with your family or work out.
Making a life
Be
plan like we
outside.
discussed
Yeah,
earlier.
exactly.
Yeah.
Someone asked a question about, do you recommend Tax GPT? Are any of you guys familiar with
Yeah.
that?
I've heard of it,
Yeah.
but
Heard of it,
I don't.
What are you using it, Gail?
I've played with it. It's a GPT program that focuses on tax law, and they've got all the tax law loaded and all the regulations and everything.
So
And
research primarily.
it's research.
Yeah, it's tax.
Right.
Yeah, I actually had a conversation with the founder just last week, and it was pretty amazing because, they're citing all the resources, all the technical resources, and also the court cases, and everything is cited, like you say. What I found very interesting, though, is it's a really small company.
Oh, yeah.
And we're in a day of innovation. I mean, I forget I always watch a lot of YouTubes on this technology, and it might have been Eric Schmidt or somebody like that saying, we're going to see a Fortune 500 level company that basically is a company of one human. I
can't remember
that's pretty mind-blowing.
who stated it, if
Do
it was
you
Sam
hear that?
Altman or otherwise, but they said we're going to see the first solo billion-dollar company.
Yeah. That's exciting, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Now, you can do that. What TaxGPT is doing, you can do yourself in a smaller way. If you have a question about a particular like IRS instruction booklet or the cost segregation study or something like that, you can take the documentation. It can be hundreds of pages, and you can upload it, attach it to a prompt. And ask questions. I do this all the time.
Yeah.
Court cases, it works. Explain this court case for me in plain English, this tax court case. Look at this case that I've outlined, this hypothetical case that may or may not be my client, and then compare it to this case and tell me if you think will we succeed? Will we prevail?
And that goes back to your original point, Blake. You said just use it, right? Oh. The more you use it, the more you get amazed by what it can do, and the more you're going to find ways to use it.
And I think that's one of the most effective things is you just start with a question, and then you start just as if you were having a conversation with the person. You say, well, no, that's not exactly what I meant this. Or, well, but now that you said that, what do you think about this? And the conversation can go on and on and on. It's just not it's not a what's this, yes or no, and then you get an answer.
It's strange at first, though.
Yeah.
Like that's changing your mindset from thinking I have to know what output I want to just knowing I have a question. Like asking the question is hard.
Yeah.
So this came in as a comment. Can I? It's a comment that I'm going to turn into a question, because it's reminding me of like WebMD back in the day. Said I have several clients who have sent me information they got from AI when they did their own tax research. Invariably, the conclusions these clients had made were inaccurate. So what happens when they start doing the WebMD? Looking up what's my symptoms and then telling their accountant, oh, this is what you should be doing for me when they have no idea.
I think it's better than TikTok, right? So
Exactly.
Step up.
Probably.
it's a step up from that.
But it's dangerous, right? Because
do
now
think
they're
that's-
telling you how to do your
Well, they
job.
still do that already. I mean,
Do they?
they hear something on TikTok
TikTok.
or something, and say, I heard this, and I think that applies to my tax situation, and you're like, I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
And that is a challenge. Our clients are going to come to us more prepared to talk about whatever it is if they're using the technology. So it's just like with WebMD, right? Sometimes if I have a symptom, I'm going to do my research, and then when I end up going to the doctor, I feel like I know a little bit more about what questions to ask. And so it could be a good thing, but it could also be a little bit of a challenge because we have to make sure we keep our skills up as CPAs.
Well, and that's on the short list. That exactly right there is on the short list of reasons why I recommend folks get in now, because your clients have access to this tool, and if you aren't familiar with what it is and how it works, you're at a disadvantage, right? Your clients are going to say, "Well, I found this here," and you're going to go, "Well, I can't, I don't even know what to do with that," right? So,
here's another great place to start. In addition to research, which I think is probably the best place, is sales, pricing. If you don't, and this could help you with switching from that hourly billing situation, right? Is AI is a really great negotiator, and it's a really great value pricer. And I use it all the time. I used it yesterday to create a 3-tiered fixed price set of options for a client. And it gave me a range, and it did the research. It went out and found out like what is an acceptable range from like other websites for this type of thing. And so use it for the things that you're the weakest at. Right? Not the things you're the strongest at. Because like if you're a tax law expert, you would probably not be that impressed by the legal analysis from AI at this point. Because you've done it for 20 years or more. But you didn't train in like sales, right? But you have to do it. I think it could really help.
It's a great point.
Alexander, you made a comment earlier, and Blake, you were just kind of touching on it. So yes, just use it. One of the things that I think is really important is that we have to be using it. It's only through using it every day for 2 years that somebody asked me a question. How would I go about this? Well, if I'm using ChatGPT, I'm going to do it this way. If I'm using Claude, I'm going to do it this way. If I'm using Spark, I'm going to do it this way. If I'm in Perplexity, so depending on the tools you have access to, depending on the question, depending on what you want to do, there's different ways of handling that, right? You've got custom GPTs in ChatGPT. You've got projects in Claude. You've got, we have assistants in Spark. So you have to be comfortable with the tools, but it's only through using it that you're going to be able to understand what am I trying to accomplish and how am I going to go about doing that. And honestly, within Spark, there's, somebody asked me a question, I'm like, well, if you're needing to come back to this often, I would do it this way. If it's a one-off thing, I would do it this way, and so you can't really do that if you're not fluent in the tools.
And I've found that breaking down certain types of requests into steps is the way you get the best output, and that's going to be very different depending on what type of request you're making.
Right.
Yeah.
So, like, if you're trying to write an article on like a blog article, don't just ask for the article. Don't just say, "Give me an article." Start by asking it to do research, then have it create an outline, and then have it write each section of the outline in turn, just like a student would, right? Or just like, honestly, I would. I would never just sit down and start writing.
Right.
I have a process, so.
Absolutely.
So a lot of these small firm owners are freaking out again because now there's more things for them to do and learn, and the rest of their team is going to go, help me, help me, help me. Can you delegate this to someone in your team? What kind of skill set, who can do this within your team that's not you, the owner that is already having to do all these 8 million things?
Really anybody. I mean, it can be a great recruiting tool too, because small firms are always trying to compete with the larger firms to bring in new recruits. And how exciting would it be if I'm just out of college and say, John, we want you to come into our firm and we want you to build, help you build our use of AI technology. That would be, and the person that wants that is, that's the one you want to hire, right? So, but it could be anybody that's in the firm that just would have some interest in it, I think.
Yeah, I would say give these tools to your least experienced employees, to the newbies, not to the most experienced people. They will have the biggest benefit. Studies have shown that. It levels people up dramatically.
Yeah, sorry, finish your thought there.
No, so...
Well, and then you as the more experienced person can always check their work just like you would in any other
You should be,
circumstance,
right? Yeah, so this is basically like that layer between you and them. So I know one of the biggest frustrations of firm owners is having to constantly answer questions.
Right,
My staff
that's what
are
I'm getting. They keep asking me questions.
Give them Perplexity, or give them Spark, or give them Copilot, and they can tell them to ask that question there first. It's like 20 years ago. All of my staff, I said, Google it before you ask me. Did you Google this? And if not, go back and now it's use Perplexity.
So maybe a click down from that. I had somebody ask me. I'm curious to get your all's take on this. Had somebody ask me a similar question last week. They said, "All right, so this is a firm owner. He's got 5 staff, and he said, I want to give this to them, but I can't let them play. Like I don't know how." He's like, I've been experimenting with it, and I kind of know what works for me, but they need to be, their production. They need to be billing hours, and so he said, how do I get this to them when it may mean a hit to their efficiency first? Because so what's your take on that? How do you do that?
Well, one way I talked about Excel, because everybody uses Excel so often. Like, it's great at writing Excel macros. And so you could ask your staff, say, okay, go look at your Excel spreadsheets, and where are you spending a lot of time doing the same thing over and over again? And in that case, ask ChatGPT or whatever tool you want to write the macro or tell you how to write the macro in Excel. And now what have you done? They've learned how to use it for that purpose, and they've automated a task
And
at the
it
same
saves
time.
them time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but TJ, that in that situation, that firm owner is in trouble because now the staff are more efficient and are billing fewer hours.
Right.
So
Goes full circle, yeah.
Yeah, so you really have to, if you're going to give this tool to your team, it's funny because actually the hesitation comes from this place of they're already maxed out. There's no time for them to learn this without eating into client billing. But I mean, like that's just, in my opinion, just a poor way to manage a firm if you don't have capacity, if you don't have slack in the schedule to learn things. It takes time to make time, right? It takes time to learn things and to improve processes. And that's why so many firms just sit year after year doing the same thing over and over again because they are maxed out and they don't have capacity. So you got to make that first. You got to take a hit to earnings, I guess,
Yeah.
But if you do that and you boost their productivity and at the same time you switch to a value-based pricing model or a fixed fee pricing model, you will see massive gains.
Yeah.
But it's not going to happen overnight. Like, you got to invest.
Yeah, you've got to align those incentives. I mean, I think that's what, how do you incentivize your staff? So if they are billing for hours, I've seen a number of folks who are like, okay, well, if I'm billing for hours, I'll just fudge, like, how do we?
Yeah.
There's no incentive to be more productive.
Right.
Exactly. So I
Right.
think you have to align the incentives. Otherwise, you end up with those unintended consequences.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I saw it. As a manager in public accounting, I saw staff who deliberately went slower, even after I gave them the tools to be more productive, because there was no incentive.
Right.
So.
All right. What a great way to end the day. Thank you guys so much. This was a super session.